Since the beginning of Dungeons & Dragons, we've had 6 ability scores: Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. Each of them brings forth a mechanical input to the game, as well as a roleplay side of things to dress up your character. Now, all of them have their strengths and weaknesses, except in my mind, Constitution is terrible. Constitution takes away from the game more than it adds to the game. Today I'm going to go over why Constitution absolutely sucks and how we can make the game better by getting rid of it. Number 1, the illusion of choice. So when you look at all of the other stats, specifically comparing strength and dex and then intelligence to wisdom, they each have their pros and cons, and you can decide which one you want more. Strength allows you to use certain weapons and armors. Dex allows you to use other certain weapons and armors. They have that inherent choice. They each have their ups and downs. Now, when you sacrifice one to get the other, it makes sense. However, when you sacrifice your Constitution, it sucks. It makes your character mechanically weaker. For example, if you got a character with a -1 Constitution compared to another character of the same exact class that has a +2 to Constitution, then the HP difference in just a few levels makes it even that much of a bigger gap between levels. It's absolutely ridiculous. The problem in my mind is not just the mechanical side of things, but also the flavor of the character. It doesn't make characters more or less interesting to have more or less con. It just makes them more or less viable. And I just simply don't see that as a good gameplay mechanic. Number 2, mechanical redundancy. So your character's primary method of determining what their HP is tied directly to their class. If you have a fighter, you've got to hit dice of this size. If you're a wizard, you got to hit dice of that size. And all there in between. The class truly dictates your health. Except all of a sudden then it doesn't. Because if you're a fighter with low con compared to a wizard with high con, then they end up being the same. I feel like the class should be far more impactful than one dumb little stat. Another mechanical input for your physicality, your toughness, is your armor class. And yet that is nearly non-existent in this system. It's so weird. Your ability to take hits is tied directly to, once again, your class's whole design of, do you have a D4, 6, 8, 10, 12 for your hit dice, whatever. But your AC should have some sort of mechanical input tied there in between. Another mechanical input tied in there is poison resistance. That is only partially tied to your Constitution, but far more affected is, of course, your species. Some species get a overall poison resistance, right? And class abilities and spells and things of that nature. And once again, just why does it have to be con? Why does the stat that affects your overall hit points also affect how long you can breathe underwater and how long you can go before getting exhausted? I feel like Constitution tries to be a bunch of things, but it doesn't do any of them well. Also, an incredibly annoying thing is the fact that as a spellcaster, you're typically required to get that Constitution high up because, 1, you have to make up for the lack of HP compared to the other classes, and 2, you need it for those sweet concentration checks, which once again is entirely behind the fact that you're supposed to be squishy, but then you have to, you feel essentially inclined to bump this stat up to meet the demand of the game. Once again, it to me feels like you are absolutely being punished if you have a low Constitution, and it feels like the game's bar is set to the standard of you need to have high Constitution in the first place. And it just feels odd to me because if you're playing a game where your stats matter and you can only have so many of them, then it feels really bad to have to put them into the thing to make it feel like the character should be acting the way that they should be in the first place. Number 3, the hit point problem. So it's not really any secret that modern systems, this isn't just 5e, but also a bunch of other modern systems, have a hit point problem where the numbers get really high. And of course, this is exacerbated by the fact that Constitution typically is always set to high, and thus you get more HP. This forces a level of optimization in our games, and I'm pretty open about this. I don't like optimization when it comes to creating characters. I know there's a lot of people that are. Trust me, I know there's a ton of people who go out there and watch all those videos about how to build the best character ever and put all your stats here and pick this subclass and you pick this spell, yada yada. I personally don't like that stuff. And I'm willing to bet that if presented with a better option, I'm willing to bet a lot of those people would also agree that Constitution could be done in a much healthier way than, of course, the system that we have now. But for me, ultimately, one of the big things with the hit point disparity is the fact that we get disproportionate survivability between two characters tied entirely to one stat. Because it doesn't matter how high your AC is, you're going to get hit. That's ultimately the system. How D&D works in particular is you're going to get hit. So con ended up being better anyway. And I did touch upon this earlier, but I think it does undermine the value of the spellcasters, looking at wizards in particular. I think they should be ultimately weaker because they have such high damage outbursts. But once again, if you typically take a high constitution and get a whole bunch of little spells here and there and everywhere, so your AC is high enough and your HP is high enough, and then all of a sudden it undermines that narrative feel of the balance of the game. Number 4, impact on character concept and roleplay. In my mind, I see that Constitution gets in the way. It actively hinders the idea of character concepts. You can't have the sickly but brilliant wizard because the game's going to punish you. You can't have the frail but epic warrior because the game is going to punish you. And once again, comparing the other stats, like if you have a high strength but a low dex, you've got at least some options there. Oh, hey, I can use better weapons, but I'm worse at dodging out of the way. Oh, hey, I'm the intelligent person, but I have low wisdom, and thus that gives me minus a bunch of checks there. There's a lot of ups and downs. There is movement. There is rhyme and reason. But with low constitution, there is only one thing that happens when you have it, and your character is objectively worse. So I've laid out my reasons why I hate Constitution. So how do we fix it? How do we solve it? My personal solution is to get rid of it. Get rid of it entirely. I think that Constitution actively takes away from the game versus what it adds to the game. If you laid out all the pros and cons of what con adds to the game, I think, from my personal point of view, that Constitution actively makes the game worse. So what do we do about that? Well, for starters, if you want to have the core 6 stats in the game, then you can replace Constitution with something else. It could be honor, it could be glory, it could be luck, it could be any number of things that you want to add to your game here. But ultimately, we dissect what Constitution gives you and dole those out through other various systems, which are actually relatively easy to do. Looking at hit points. No longer having a Constitution score, hit points remain consistent. It's tied to your class. It's tied to your level. Maybe you have it tied to your species as well. Maybe some species get a +1 to their HP. Maybe some, not nearly all of them, but maybe just a select few get a plus to their HP overall. But dumb down the numbers, make it consistent, and you have a more balanced gameplay, which I think is better for both the player and, very, very importantly, the DM experience. Because I know dang well, because there are so many games where people have incredibly high HPs, I know for a fact there's a lot of DMs out there that tweak the numbers a bit, added just a few more monsters, make them do a little bit more damage, and then ultimately it makes the game nonsensical because it's a cat and mouse game of, oh, the DM keeps throwing harder monsters at us, we need to have higher con. Oh, we need to have higher con because there's more monsters. And it's just like, it's just this annoying thing of just an escalation war. I really don't like it. And then once again, we can tie all the other things that aren't just the HP to other stats. Instead of Constitution saving throws, maybe they are doled out a little bit more respectively. Maybe we do have a bit more strength saving throws in the game. Maybe your ability to hold your breath underwater is tied to certain things like your strength score, your dex score. Maybe it's tied to your species. Who the heck knows? It could be entirely dependent on the situation at hand. Maybe you have those fringe things like being able to run for X period of length is tied to your class once again. Maybe the fighter is a lot better at running long distance than the wizard. That just makes sense in my mind. When it comes to concentration checks for the spellcasters, I think there's a lot of fun things you can do there. I think the design space is actually relatively large. I think there's a lot of fun features you can add. I think there's every single either class or subclass could have unique features tied to how you can improve that over the course of time. That isn't just, oh, hey, have a good con. Ultimately, I feel like Constitution and I guess several of the other stats as well, but we'll be taking a look at those at some later time. I I feel like a lot of them are just purely tied to the fact that this is how the game started. We had the strength, dex, con, int, whiz, charisma. And I feel like a lot of TTRPGs are afraid of removing that element of the game, even though I do feel like they absolutely should be removed or tweaked or something to some regard. There are, of course, a lot of systems out there that have done so. There are some systems that have less stats. There are some systems that have more stats. But when we're talking about like the big ones that have the classic six, I just feel like Constitution takes away from, once again, not only the mechanical input of the game, it takes away from the character design of the game, it takes away from the flavor of the game, and as I just mentioned before this, I think it takes away from the design space of the game. There is a lot of fun things you can do for all those fringe cases of con that doesn't have to be just tied down to, oh hey, at character creation I put all my points into this one stat. So in conclusion, I hate con, and I hope that you hate con too. I really hope so. I hope that I spur people into finally opening up their eyes to the truth that Constitution actively takes away from our games instead of adding anything of any significant relevance or import to the game. So tell me down below, did I convince you that con is terrible, or are you stuck in your ways? Do you think con is the bee's knees, cat's pajamas, dog's woof? I do want to hear it, because I, quite frankly, haven't heard too many convincing arguments about Constitution being a good stat. I have heard very little in regards of, other than, oh hey, it's part of the game. It's pretty much all I've ever heard. So tell me down below these things. I want to hear it, but that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. And thank you to my awesome patrons. You are all absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. This is actually something I'm looking at for my tabletop role-playing game. I am getting rid of Constitution as a stat. And I think for me, like as I'm designing my system, it's actually helping me out so much knowing that the numbers are going to stay so low that I don't have to sit there and think, oh, hey, you know, monsters at this higher level have to do this much damage. And, you know, just keep the numbers low, and all around it is so impactful when you do implement little features and spells and abilities and things like that that give you just a little bit more HP. When you have less, and when you have like less of any mechanic really, when you give them just a little bit more, it goes an incredibly long way. And so when you have a little HP, but then, oh hey, you can get a plus to your HP doing this one thing, then it feels that much more impactful.